After an impressive run of 10 games, how would Falcom innovate and spice things up for the 11th entry in the long-running Trails series? And the series has grown in popularity over the last few years thanks to the releases of the Crossbell games on modern hardware alongside the entries of the likes of Cold Steel 3, 4, and Reverie. But at this point, 10 games in, Falcom would have the Herculean task of developing a game that not only satisfied longtime fans, but also be a solid entry point for curious newcomers alike. Did they manage to pull it off with Trails Through Daybreak, their recent entry into the series? And is it better than Persona? I'm kidding when I say that, of course, but let's talk about Trails Through Daybreak. Now, as I begin this review, I'd like to point out that I've been on a long journey through the Trails series that started off a little rocky at first and ended in a bit of a ruinous addiction. Hence the reason this whole channel has been mainly Trails themed for the last year or two or so? I don't know. I lost track of time. Falcom has pretty much just spoiled myself and others by consistently writing really just well-written characters and having some explosive payoffs for those of us that have played through the series thus far. Now, Daybreak, like I said, has a unique task that it has to change things up just enough to appease modern audiences while rewarding longtime fans. And I think one of the big ways that they accomplish that in Trails Through Daybreak is through the combat. See, Daybreak's combat, for those of you that are unaware, starts off with an almost like, it's kind of like Ys a little bit, like an action style sort of combat, where you hit an enemy multiple times, break their stance, and then activate your shards, which then turns the combat from action to turn-based JRPG goodness. And depending on your Orbment setup, which I'll get to a little bit later, you get buffs, debuffs, all sorts of those things. And I gotta say that the combat in Trails Through Daybreak really is addicting, it's flashy, it is fun. I really had a lot of fun with this, and I really enjoyed the fact that it was a blended style of combat, and it's something that I wish more JRPGs would kind of take notes from. I think Metaphor ReFantasio seems to be copying that or maybe modeling that a little bit in their own game, which I applaud them for. But I think if more games implemented this sort of combat, we would be better off for it. Speaking of Orbments just moments ago, Daybreak kind of calls upon in the past where in past Trails games, you'd have a line system where depending on what you have set up in a specific line, it would unlock different abilities, buffs, those sorts of things. And really, really cool. I liked that callback or that going back to roots, so to speak, sort of thing. But made me feel like I was playing these Sky games or the Crossbow games again. I really enjoyed that. And what's nice about it too is that they added in this little feature where you can kind of call in this key card almost sort of thing that tells you, hey, if you have this many Mirage Sepith and this many Time Sepith set up in your Orbments and all that stuff, then you'll unlock this move. And if you have this other stuff lined up on this other line, like it was super handy and just really, really nice. It's clear that Falcom had a certain mindfulness when it came to developing this game and putting things in place that help new players get involved or get into the combat while also letting more experienced players just kind of have fun making all sorts of different builds. And what's great about this is that it allows you to have a variety of different kinds of synergies. And when we speak of synergies, we talk about the different classes for characters. You set up one that's maybe an evasion tank, one that is your CP generating machine, those sorts of things. And when it all works together, it's honestly a lot of fun to see these synergies kind of pop off and everything just work together the way it should. And that leads into my next thing that I really enjoyed about Trails Through Daybreak, which is the cast. And I have to get this out of the way so some of you can get your stones ready for this, but I think this is probably the best cast in a Trails game that we've had since the Crossbell games. I just think there's a few things that make the Arkride Solutions group really great. One of them being that it's a small ragtag group of misfits that it doesn't really seem like these characters should get along or be hanging out with each other, but when you see them interact with one another and have conversations and go through different scenarios, you see like this is a really good group of characters and they really play off of each other really, really well. Such as like Aaron's just lack of a filter and saying whatever comes to his mind. Oh, did Widow Catty want to be with the girls? I was gotta watch out for the quiet ones because there's a hungry wolf somewhere under there, huh? Fairy's kind of fish out of water commentary as she's experiencing Calvard and the different things like food and radios and different types of technologies. or Van's one-track mind, even when it comes to sweets. I found myself laughing a lot with this crew, and I'd have to say that probably my two favorite characters are easily Van and Catra. I might have a bit of a bias with Catra, what with me being a robotics teacher and Catra's engineering side of things, and having Pharos and Zeos. I'm getting the names mixed up, but you know the robots that I'm talking about. And I was also just really surprised with Van. He lets on this sort of like devil-may-care attitude, but at his core, he's a pragmatist with a really soft heart that you see in different side quests, specifically the orphanage one later on in the game. I think it's like chapter 5 is where you have that side quest. But when it comes to these sorts of stories, the heroes are only as good as their villains, and holy crap. Can we talk about Melchior for a second? From the moment Melchior is introduced, I was super uneasy the whole time. You can go see my live stream of the whole playthrough of the game here on the channel. And like, it's not that like Melchior is introduced in a particularly terrifying or heinous way. He actually comes off pretty disarming and just kind of aloof a little bit, but anytime he was on the screen, he just exuded this aura of uneasiness that you honestly can't help but keep your guard up when he's around. And his boss, the leader of Almata, Dantes, is a similar way, but I think he's far more disarming and approachable than Melchior is. If we're talking about like Batman villains, relating them to them, Melchior is more like Joker and Dantes is more like Ra's al Ghul or Ra's al Ghul. Did we ever settle that debate as to how you pronounce that correctly? And that's kind of the thing that goes into really the general theme of Daybreak, is that it's a darker game. It really goes to certain places with its theme and its setups and its story and things like that. And if you're coming from the Cold Steel games, we're kind of used to things working out in the end in a clean fashion with anyone rarely dying. And I've talked at length about that, so I'll just direct any of you that are curious about my thoughts on that to my Cold Steel reviews. But Daybreak seems like Falcom heard those complaints and said, fine, you guys want character deaths? Well, here you go. And this honestly might be a bit of a hurdle for some folks, and understandably so, because it is kind of tough to go from one end of the spectrum to the other in that regard. But personally, I enjoyed it a little bit more. It was nice to have real stakes that felt like they had weight, as opposed to Cold Steel, where after a couple of fake out deaths, you kind of get the sense that no one is really in danger. But that doesn't mean Daybreak necessarily did this well either. As a matter of fact, there's a few things that I didn't feel Daybreak got right, but for that, we need to go into spoiler territory, so here's your official warning to skip ahead in the review using the handy-dandy timestamps provided down below. Now, in Trails Through Daybreak, Falcom introduces an alignment system that ranks up in 3 different avenues: law, gray, and chaos. And depending on the level of each, it opens up opportunities and events with certain characters or groups later on in the game, and it specifically comes into play in the last 2 chapters of the game. Now, I was surprised to see that I could have allied with groups like Ouroboros if my chaos level was high enough in chapter 5. Now, instead, I allied with Shizuna, my vicious and formidable ninja queen, and her right-hand man, Kurogane, who, honestly, Kurogane was pretty awesome. He managed to get me to laugh a couple of times in unexpected ways that I just didn't really see him being... Well, I didn't expect him to have jokes. Oh, you're saying they were real people?
No. That was but a mere lighthearted jest.
And during chapter 5, you go through a gauntlet of a carnival, ending each section or each level of the kind of underground area with a boss fight with a member of Almata. At the end of each fight, you're given a choice between sparing them or killing them, cutting them down, so to speak. Now, I decided to take down Viola and Alexander, but spared... Crap, what was her name? Goldfish brain is attacking. Olympia, that's her name. I spared Olympia. And I was curious how this would play out, and I didn't have to wait too terribly long to find out that my decisions didn't really matter. See, in the final chapter of the game, as pandemonium begins and just chaos starts ensuing, the previous members of Almata that died are resurrected, and you have to fight them again. Now, granted, pretty cool reveal. I was not expecting that, even though I probably should have seen it coming given that it's a Trails game. And normally I'm pretty harsh about these sort of things, but I felt like in Daybreak it kind of fit a little bit better. At the end of the day, I honestly would have rather have had Falcom just not give me choices in those moments so they could just tell the story that they clearly wanted to tell and just take it where they wanted it to go. I mean, hey, I'm happy when Falcom tries new things, and usually it lands pretty well. Take, for example, the Connect events being a little more refined in this game as they were in the Cold Steel games. I felt like I had to spend an adequate amount of time with a lot of the cast members while only missing out on maybe 1 or 2 in each chapter. And thankfully, Save Scumming allowed me to see them all. And when I try to think of some valid criticisms for Daybreak, the previous section of my review is all I can really come up with. I thoroughly enjoyed Daybreak. In several ways, it felt like a return to the earlier games in the series, and the music. Look, I love me some jazzy vibes and heavy guitar riffs, and Daybreak has both in spades. So much so that I put a few of the songs from my soundtrack on my classroom playlist. For those of you that are curious, the songs I put were Namanaki Akumi no Hate short version, probably butchered that, and Unmitigated Evil. Seriously, Unmitigated Evil is one of those songs that you listen to in the gym while working out, and it just amps you up. And because I know I'm going to get comments about this, let's address whether or not you can start with Daybreak. As always, the best place to start a story like this is from the beginning, and PTL that Falcom announced that they're remaking Sky first chapter. But let's think about the gamer in my shoes with a 40-hour work week, job, family, outside responsibilities, and so on. You probably don't really have a whole lot of free time. So I probably am not going to suggest to that sort of gamer to jump through 10, 40 to 100 plus hour JRPGs just to enjoy Daybreak, just to enjoy Daybreak. Why was that so hard? And I think Falcom had this in mind too, because it seems like they built Daybreak to be a really solid entry point for newcomers. I was so happy to see them include things like a backstory section in the main menu that, while not perfect, it did summarize the events of the previous games in an attempt to help catch new players up pretty well. And shoot, they even included a glossary of terms to help gamers understand what the heck are Orbments, the regions, who the Bracer Guild is, and all these other things going on in the game. And personally, I think if you're curious about the series and want to start with Daybreak, you're totally fine to do so. Just be forewarned that you may wind up enjoying this game so much that you do go back and play all of the games in the series, and maybe you start a YouTube channel and it's just downhill from there. So all in all, I think Falcom nailed what they needed to with Daybreak. We got a new cast of characters that are an absolute joy to play as and be around, a story that, although dark at times, took the series where it needed to and opened some exciting new opportunities that may take place in a new space. Wink, wink. Nudge, nudge. I do wish we got more time learning about the Grendel, though, and we got more of Catra's backstory and maybe more about the Septian Church's involvement and how maybe learn more about what Ouroboros is planning. But I'm sure that's what Daybreak 2 is for, and I, for one, cannot wait for its Western release, which is hopefully soon, right? Like February soon, maybe? Let's go, dude! Let's go! Now, I've glossed over a lot of the plot points for the game, mainly due for the sake of time. I've skipped over my thoughts on Maxim, although, gotta be honest, Maxim kind of won me over by the end of the game. I'm just saying. You know, I didn't talk about some of my favorite side quests. I didn't talk about my favorite NPCs, partial because I can't remember some of their names. The only NPC I can remember is Clutch, because Clutch seems really forgetful, and I kind of relate with that a little bit. But if there's something specific that you want to discuss from Trails Through Daybreak, leave a comment down below, but just be mindful of spoilers. We got some new people rolling in through town here on the channel. But look, if you're a JRPG fan and you want to get into this series, definitely give this game a go. Granted, in 2024, we are eating good because there have been plenty of JRPGs to choose from. As a matter of fact, the weekend I am recording this review, Metaphor Refantasio has released, and oh my goodness. And you know, now that I'm totally caught up with Trails, I've kind of been thinking about what game series I should take a trip through next, and actually, kind of already started playing through the East games, so look forward to my review of East 1, 2, and Origin to drop. Well, I was going to say soon, but let's be honest, it might be a while, but just look forward to that review. As always, greatly appreciate y'all's continued support here on the channel. It still blows my mind that y'all choose to watch my content and like it, comment, share it around, and do all those things. It is super humbling, and I just appreciate it so much. If you're new to the channel, check out some of my other reviews of the Trails games, as well as some of my playthroughs here on the channel. But those are my thoughts on Trails Through Daybreak. I'd love to hear from y'all down in the comments. Thank you for watching my review, and until next time, happy trails.